Good afternoon, and welcome back to the first strategy dashboard of 2026. Nice to see you, David.
Nice to see you, Laura. Happy New Year.
You too. So we are kicking off our strategy dashboard with I think this is interesting for me. But you reference Prime Minister Carney's speech in Davos, and you say it well articulates something that has been at play for the last few years, which is that the economic order that we have operated under really since post Cold War is fragmenting. Let's talk about the changing posture towards these shifts and how they might not be just cyclical or geopolitical.
Yeah, and I think like his speech drew a standing ovation, of course, which is somewhat a rarity at the World Economic Forum. But I think it was very well articulated and quite blunt. Whereas a lot of the other commentary that we've seen has been perhaps somewhat more diplomatic in nature, and it certainly seemed to draw Donald Trump's ire in the aftermath of the speech. But I think it was commended for how what a blunt articulation of the situation really is. And I think the difference now, I mean, we've been talking about the fragmentation of globalization for some time now, and certainly things have been moving in that direction. But previously, and particularly during Trump's first term, I think there was more of a wait and see type of approach from international partners, where they hoped that after Trump's term, that things could kind of go back to the globalization norms of previous decades. But Carney's speech to me was really symbolic of the fact that there's a realization that this trend towards fragmenting globalization and a more bigger focus on individual sovereignty and economic security is becoming more deeply entrenched. And even after the current Trump administration, I think the collective psyche in U.S. politics, some of these things are going to transcend Trump's presidency and be ingrained in future administrations as well. And for other governments, that means you need to adapt. You need to take these things seriously, which I mean, certainly they have been, but there has to be the realization that we can't just wait and hope for things to revert back to the way they were. Carney's effectively said that those days are now officially, I suppose, over.
Mhm. One of the things that you comment on is the global institutions that really underpinned globalization. They're misaligned with today's balance of power. Now, a world with weaker global coordination is one with greater policy dispersion, is something you said. I just quoted you. Can you unpack that a little bit? What are the consequences for financial markets? What does the weaker global coordination result in?
Yeah, I mean, so these institutions, a lot of them were built out of the post-war period, and some, like the United Nations and even the European Union, are essentially a peace project to prevent global wars. But others were projects of global integration, and which ultimately, um, ironically, were in many cases the design of these was U.S. led and promoted much greater efficiency of resources around the world. And when these unwind, it basically has the opposite effect. I mean, instead of decision making just being purely on efficiency, there's many other considerations that have to go into place now, whether it be domestic capacity, you know, economic security, rethinking how our supply chains work. All of these sorts of things necessitate a different approach to whether it be trade, fiscal policy, or just industrial policy in general, which in recent years has been much more of a phenomenon in emerging markets than developed markets. But now in developed markets, we're having to think about these things, at the forefront again. Things like energy security, which for a number of years were somewhat of an afterthought in some circles. So there's certainly going to be investment consequences which come out of this different type of approach to governance as well too.
Um, I mean, we've been talking about a lot of these shifts at Four Strong for a while, but what would you say? Why is global diversification maybe more important now than ever? And how are the markets responding generally?
Yeah, I think when you have um, less cooperation and more dispersion, whether it be on um, policy, like fiscal policy, monetary policy, or just regional disparities in terms of the economic makeup. When you have less cooperation, a less integrated system, that means that some of um, the correlations between asset classes on a global basis that we've seen hold up for a number of decades now will likely start to break down or at least weaken. And thus, that's a great advertisement essentially for global diversification because if everything is highly correlated, then the benefits of diversification weaken. But when things have a lower correlation with one another, then diversification can work in spades. So that's first and foremost. The second thing that's really important is just having a really well informed global macro view. When you have structural shifts in the global economy, um, being able to decipher what things are structurally important from what is potentially noise is a really big advantage. So firms with a global view, I think will have a really big advantage in the period ahead.
Great. Thank you so much for your time, David. The full piece will be available on the website as well. And I will see you guys next month.
Thanks again, Laura.